Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Swyftx Squawk. I'm Pav, lead market analyst here at Swyftx. And this week we're going to do a little bit of a continuation on our write-up last week. If you didn't see it, recommend checking it out over at Swyftx Learn. We'll have a link in the description as well. But basically diving into what's the data behind a lot of the movements that we've seen in the past regarding Q4. And as a quick recap, generally there has been some consensus that there are some positive tailwinds blowing for the crypto markets in a post-halving year, which is what we're in 2025, to the extent where we have seen double-digit gains for Bitcoin. But it's the second week of October. We've seen Bitcoin kind of rally, but also cool off as well. At this point in time, we are seeing that Bitcoin, while it is down maybe 1% over the last 24 hours, it has had still quite a bit of a good performance to the start of October. Now, what I wanted to cover in this particular write-up was to go into what is the current positioning, what is the current thoughts, what is the market doing right now in preparation for both the end of the year. The market at the end of the day, it is just a group of people basically taking the information that's available and putting that to work and expecting a result in the market. So for something like Bitcoin, it may be helpful just to understand what is the consensus, what is a concentration of ideas on where price can go heading into the back end of this year. Now, the first place I want to start is option markets. Now, I wouldn't get too hung up if you're not sure what option markets are or how to read the data. Really, all you need to know is that they are another instrument available to the market, generally a little bit more of a sophisticated type of investor that basically allows them to speculate where they think price is going to head to a particular date. So obviously for us, we're interested into the end of 2025. So this is what we're looking at right now. We're looking at a contract data heading into the 26th of December, 2025. And what we can see are these noticeable peaks here. Now, these peaks basically represent where the market is placing expectations on where they expect price to go to before the 26th of December. And we can see two real key outcomes here. We can see a heavy consensus around 140K, so new all-time highs, and also a spread of expectations anywhere from 150 to 200,000 US dollars. Now, again, to iterate that this is not that the market is going to go to these levels, but this particular operator in the current market, knowing what it knows about the economy and the market and the way Bitcoin's price is moving today, this is where they're placing a majority of their bets, if you want to call it. So we can use this data to work out expectation for this player in the market. And the key takeaway is very simply higher. Another key piece of data that we can pull from option markets as well is looking at something called the put-call ratio. Now, again, the simple way to explain this is almost thinking of it as a bull-bear ratio. So how many bulls are there to bears? And when we're below 50, there's more bulls than bears. So right now we can see that this ratio tells us that the bulls are outnumbering bears. Now, again, this data does change quite frequently. You can look at this data yourself. I've provided links in the article and write-up below. But this is obviously giving us that further validation to the idea that the market is potentially buying into or expecting a lot of, again, what we talked about last week about Q4 being a bump period in a post-halving year. Now, another more newer, or if you want to call it novel way that we can also look at what price may do for the rest of the year is to turn to prediction markets like poly markets. So I grabbed this data from Polymarket just recently. And again, this does change. It is subject to change, but it's basically looking at by the end of the year, will Bitcoin hit $130,000 US, which is the next all-time high. We've already hit 120 and a bit of change. So right now the market has a heavy expectations. You can see since the end of September into the start of October, it's really gone quite strongly that we will see $130,000 to the point where it's almost 80% chance that the market's baking it in. So this is also where you can potentially start to think of obviously the counter argument here. You know, what if safety isn't in numbers? If you subscribe to some of the ideologies of people like Warren Buffett, is this an age-old case of the crowd being wrong? And if so, what does that look like? So again, this may be potentially from two data points, a more sophisticated crowd and the more, you could call it the more consensus crowd as well. Again, a larger group of people in the prediction markets and probably option markets that everyone is aiming for higher. So again, we're not looking at any guarantees of what's going to happen in the future, but if we're talking about post-halving years being quite significant to the market, it's obviously impacting and influencing a lot of the decision-making that we might be seeing in prediction markets, in option markets. What did price do during the start of Q4 and the end of Q4 last time around that we were here? This is what that looked like. So you can see here that basically start of Q4, we saw an extended rally after a few months of consolidation around September time, very similar to what we've seen most recently. So again, it rhymes, but it's not necessarily going to be the same. But again, if we were going to have that expectation that this potential prophecy is going to fulfill, that October is generally Uptober and that Q4 can provide those outsized returns for an asset like Bitcoin. This is about that time where we'd want to see the current momentum, current strength that's in the market continue. We would raise our eyebrows and be potentially concerned if we don't see a similar trend potentially start to play out. Now, again, these are all data points that are subject to change. Nothing is ironclad in this market or any market, as we've seen through the whole of 2025. It's been a very volatile period of time for markets globally, even outside of crypto. So we would just caution that obviously we never know what's going to happen out there. But again, if we're trying to understand if the market is just pricing in, again, what we said at the start of this episode, what it knows, and everything we've pointed out today is articulating that the market's expectations are for higher, the historic data points for higher. This is basically what the runway has looked like in the past, heading into those higher prices. And this is where we are today. We can start to then form some sort of idea of what we'd want to see next. And again, this really comes into obviously the next subsequent weeks being obviously quite positive for the market. And again, if we do see some trepidation or some weakness in the market and we don't see this follow through, maybe that really does need to spark that conversation of, okay, maybe this time it is different. But that's it from me here today at Swyftx. I hope you found that valuable. We're back again next week to bring you what's happening in the markets. Thank you.